I created a build for every single Titan exotic in Destiny 2. I've got builds that can crowd control an entire room with Suspend, I've got builds that can do hundreds of thousands of damage with a single super, I've got builds that can spam infinite grenades, builds that can spam infinite melee abilities, builds that can spam every ability all the time. No matter what crazy build you can dream of, I've probably got it in this video. I rank these builds with stars, although, and I've said this in the Warlock and Hunter videos too, these are just my initial subjective thoughts. Very little scientific testing has gone on here, these are more just build ideas that you can use. An Insurmountable Skullfort. Arc. Touch of Thunder plus Knockout. Shock, Resistance, Recharge, Feedback. Go around thunderclapping everything for health and melee regen. Enhanced Storm Grenades for ad clear plus enhanced melee range when critically wounding an enemy. Used Monte Carlo and Melee Kickstart 2 to top off melee energy. Mask of the Quiet One. Also Arc. Juggernaut plus Touch of Thunder for ridiculous grenades. Instinct, Resistance, Shock, Magnitude for even more ridiculous grenades. Being damaged gives you ability energy, and being critically wounded procs a jolt. Some nice synergy between Mask and Spark of Instinct here, since having your shields broken releases the arc explosion, thus theoretically healing you automatically. Problem is, despite this description of this exotic, it doesn't actually fully heal you. Instead it just brings you to about here on your health bar. Cool idea for an exotic, but it's just not good. Kepri's Horn. This is the most vile looking helmet imaginable. Ornament is a requirement. Solar. Sol Invictus Consecration. Singeing Ashes Solace Eruption. Spawn Rally Barricade to Scorch, allowing you to proc certain fragments, and more importantly, Sol Invictus. Solar Final Blows will also recharge your barricade. Can be paired with Throwing Hammers too, but there are much better options. Helm of Saint-14. Void. Bastion Offensive Bulwark. Reprisal, Persistence, Undermining, Vigilance. Ward of Dawn Bubble will blind targets inside, give an overshield and increase grenade regen. Also does a lot through Ward of Dawn itself, namely Weapons of Light and Armor of Light. However, this isn't really reliant on the exotic itself. Helm just doesn't fit too well into Void 3.0 unfortunately. Eternal Warrior. Arc. Touch of Thunder, Knockout. Resistance, Discharge, Shock, Magnitude. Arc weapons get bonus damage on kills. Doesn't stack with Surge mods though, so it's got limited usage. It's a pretty versatile build if you pair it with arc weapons like the Iclos SMG, Cold Heart, Path of Least Resistance, Hot Head, Song of Ear-Yurt, whatever you like really. One-Eyed Mask. Void. Bastion Offensive Bulwark. Persistence, Instability, Starvation, Vigilance. Kill marked targets for an overshield, which doesn't give you increased grenade recharge with Offensive Bulwark. In fact, it doesn't really have a lot of synergy with anything. Much better options out there these days. I don't think I've seen anyone use this helmet since at least 200 BC. Precious Scars. Can be run on any subclass, but I've gone with Solar. Sol Invictus Consecration. Benevolence, Torches, Mercy, Tempering. Solar weapon kills will heal you slightly. It's somewhat viable, and the healing can save you on occasion, but it doesn't really have much synergy with builds. Could be fun if you prefer a support role though, and could be fun when paired with a less survivable subclass such as Arc. Loreley Splendor. Solar. Roaring Flames, Sol Invictus. Torches, Solace, Empyrean Ashes. Throwing Hammer kills will create sunspots. Automatic sunspots when your shields break at the cost of your barricade. Phenomenal build for solo content, although Loreley did get nerfed some time ago because it used to give ×2 restoration, which was just ridiculous. Nowadays I prefer a few other exotics with this build. You'll see a few of them in a minute. Very specific use case though, solo raids. You can heal without even thinking about it. Think solo Nezarec, for example. Cadmus Ridge Lancecap. Stasis. Tectonic Harvest, Diamond Lance. Fissures, Shards, Rending, Conduction, Rhyme. Throw lances for crystals, shatter crystals for shards that track towards you and give you an overshield. Use Elemental Charge on your legs to gain armor charge by picking up these shards. When you're behind your barricade, you can create Diamond Lances by getting rapid precision hits or rapid kills. Arguably the best you'll get out of Behemoth. It's tied with Hoarfrost for me. ACD Zero Feedback Fence. I had a pretty awful build created for these gauntlets before Season 22's overhaul, but now I've got a few interesting options. You can pair this with Stasis if you want, but I found Strand to be the most fun. Flechette Storm, Drenger's Lash. Continuity, Transmutation, Fury, Warding. Feedback Fence gives you an armor charge on a melee hit. We can combine this with stacks on our boots to gain 2 charges per melee hit, and 3 charged up mods on our chest to increase our max stacks to 6. Flechette Storm does many hits at once, meaning we can get max stacks on a single melee activation. If we use melee kickstart on our arms, this will consume the stacks on our next melee and fully refund all the energy, meaning we can spam Flechette Storm near infinitely against bosses. Doesn't do insane damage or anything, but it's quite entertaining. Oh, and Monte Carlo can be useful too, same goes for most of the builds that focus around melees. Doomfang Pauldron, Void, Controlled Demolition, Offensive Bulwark. Exchange, Reprisal, Vigilance, Provision. Use Bolstering Detonation and Focusing Strike on your arms to feed even more energy into your grenade and melee abilities. Doomfangs allow you to extend your Sentinel Shield super by using your shield throw to kill enemies. Getting melee hits refunds shield throws while in your super, Void melee kills while not in your super grants super energy. Synthoceps. While these gauntlets are great with the solar build, I'm actually going for Strand. Banner of War into the fray. Warding, Generation, Transmutation, Fury. Getting a melee kill raises the Banner of War. Now, if you haven't seen what Banner of War does, it's kinda busted. You gain increased melee and sword damage alongside a periodic burst of healing. When you or nearby allies get kills, the duration of the banner is refreshed and the frequency of healing pulses increased. We pair this with Synthos because the melee damage increase you get from Banner of War is quite substantial and stacks with Synthos. Plus, you can pair this with a 1-2 punch shotgun or freeze with conditional finality to get silly amounts of damage out of your melee abilities. Aeon Safe, Void, Bastion, Offensive Bulwark. Obscurity, Starvation, Remnants, Persistence. Finish a yellow bar to grant special ammo to your teammates, finish a boss to grant heavy ammo to your teammates. I'm pretty sure most people know how Aeons work at this point. I went with Void for invisibility on finisher kills and high uptime on your overshield, although you definitely could use any subclass, Strand being a good contender too. Ashen Wake, Solar, Roaring Flames, Sol Invictus. Resolve Empyrean Searing Torches. Run Grenade Kickstart, Heavy-Handed and Impact Induction on your gauntlets with Charged Up plus stacks on stacks plus double innovation. Really spoiling Titans with the mods today, don't tell the other classes. I don't even main Titan, that's the worst thing. Your fusion grenades explode on impact. When you get a kill with these grenades, you gain grenade energy back. Additionally, due to Grenade Kickstart, when you throw your grenade, you gain additional grenade energy back. This allows for an infinite loop of kill an enemy with a fusion grenade, pick up an orb if you need, then kill another enemy. If you still need more energy, you can hit something with your hammer to proc impact induction. Furthermore, if you get a kill with said hammer, it will drop an orb which will grant grenade energy too. Super interesting build, I'd recommend trying it out. Wormgod's Caress, Strand, Banner of War, Dregner's Lash. Generation, Warding, Continuity, Ascent. Melee kills increase the damage of your melee attacks, this stacks up to 5 times. Using a glaive melee counts towards the damage bonus, and since glaive melees don't consume ammo, we might as well use Winterbite. Banner of War also helps us greatly with both survivability and damage, although I'm fairly sure the melee damage buff you get is reduced slightly for glaive melees. At least it seems that way. Stronghold, Solar, Consecration, Sol Invictus, Mercy, Empyrean, Solace, Torches. You've probably seen clips of people face tanking Crota on contest mode using something similar to this build. It doesn't matter too much what sword you use since any sword will have maxed out stats thanks to strongholds. The other part of the exotic allows you to build stacks by blocking damage from enemies, which can be converted into a ×2 restoration buff when you damage a target with the sword. You can keep up this buff for a considerable amount of time using your abilities or a solo weapon thanks to Ember of Empyrean. Citan's Ramparts, Void, Controlled Demolition, Offensive Bulwark. Provision, Instability, Persistence, Undermining. Your towering barricade can be shot through by you and your teammates in exchange for a lower amount of base health. This can be decent in Nightfalls, I guess. The reduced health and duration really hits barricade hard, but with max resilience alongside utility kickstart, insulation, bolstering detonation, focusing strike, it can be a usable option if you don't have anything better. Icefall Mantle, Stasis. You can actually run this on other subclasses, but Stasis fits the theme of this exotic a bit more. Tectonic Harvest, Diamond Lance. Fissures, Shards, Rime, Conduction, Refraction. Your barricade is replaced with an overshield that lasts for 20 seconds. Since a recent update, you can also gain a stasis weapon damage boost for killing enemies with stasis weapons. You can gain the maximum damage buff when you proc your barricade. This doesn't stack with surge mods, however the ×4 damage boost you get is higher than the ×3 you get from surges. As such, this can be quite useful in damage rotations involving Cold Comfort, a stasis rocket. No backup plans. Void, Bastion, Offensive Bulwark. Vigilance, Persistence, Starvation, Remnants. Rapid kills and powerful enemy kills with a shotgun grant an overshield. Additionally, casting Barricade grants this overshield. Additionally, hitting enemies with your shield throw also will grant an overshield. While we have an overshield, shotguns get a 35% damage boost, making the exotic shotgun Legend of Acreus do really good damage. Just remember to pop your Barricade just before damage to gain the overshield. Second Chance, also Void, Offensive Bulwark, Controlled Demolition, Provision, Starvation, Expulsion, Instability. These grant an extra melee charge for your shield throw. The shields also weaken and stun barrier champions. This one's surprisingly good, but only really if you're using Monte Carlo. Monte Carlo is going to give you melee energy for kills and damage, making it a brilliant pairing. Our fragments allow us to spam grenades and shield throws constantly, and equipping various arm mods can increase uptime further. Point Contact Cannon Brace, Arc, Touch of Thunder, Knockout, Amplitude, Feedback, Shock, Magnitude. Pretty similar to the build for Insurmountable Skullfort, except this one jolts. Go around punching stuff, and as long as you're getting a decent amount of kills, your melee energy should be topped up fairly often. Monte Carlo again is a good pick here, but it's not essential. Pyrogale Gauntlets, Solar, Consecration, Sol Invictus, Ember of Torches, Solace, Empyrean, and Ashes. Your Burning Maul super is now a singular hammer strike that does significantly more damage, turning it into a really good burst super. Both your super and Consecration generate flame tornado things, which do less than optimal damage, but it's fine because the rest of the build is super good. Crest of Alpha Lupi, I don't know. Void, Bastion, Offensive Bulwark, Vigilance, Reprisal, Persistence, Starvation. When you cast your Barricade, you create a healing pulse that heals. Why do I have that written in my script? This is nice alongside Bastion, which gives you an overshield when you pop your Barricade. Your supers also generate an additional orb, and specifically with Ward of Dawn, it makes all orbs generated much more potent. It's about a 2 times increase in super energy gained, at least it is according to Dim. Actium War Rig, Void. I feel like I'm going Void a lot. Controlled Demolition, Offensive Bulwark, Starvation, Undermining, Exchange, Remnants. Now there's 2 pathways I can go down here, one of which is a genuinely good build and the other should be pretty obvious if you're a Titan main. On the one hand, use Xenophage or Thunderlord to do really consistent damage to bosses. On the other hand, break out the sweet business and enjoy never having to reload. While it does take up your exotic slot, you can still use a machine gun in your heavy which also auto-reloads. Hallowfire Heart, Solar, Sol Invictus, Roaring Flames, Eruption, Blistering, Tempering, Searing. I've gone with Hammer Strike rather than Throwing Hammer for the sole purpose of setting this build apart from the others. Basically, this exotic gives you improved ability regen when your super is charged. When standing in a sunspot, solar kills will create a sunspot at the target's location. Sunshot or Prometheus Lens are great pairings here. Solo weapon kills also create fire sprites, and killing an enemy with your melee ability procs an improved ignition which grants grenade energy when it kills stuff. Armamentarium, gain an additional grenade charge. What do we do with this? Strand, Banner of War into the fray. Transmutation, Warding, Generation, Fury. Since our grapple is a grenade, we gain 2 charges just like a hunter. The difference here is that we can use Banner of War to increase grapple melee damage. We can also spawn tangles on weapon kills where we have Woven Mail, which can be thrown and grappled onto to traverse large distances. I'd pair this with Quicksilver Storm for even more tangles. Heart of Inmost Light, a very, very neutral exotic, but I feel it pairs best with Arc. Touch of Thunder plus Knockout are our aspects, with Amplitude, Shock, Resistance and Magnitude as our fragments. To really max this build out, I've included Absolution, Invigoration and Innovation on the boots, and Firepower on the arms. Using an ability improves the damage and regen of your other abilities by a significant amount. Not too much else to say on this one, it's just a really good exotic and a really good build. Severance Enclosure. I genuinely had no idea this piece existed before making this video. It states that powered melee kills unleash a damaging explosion. Originally when I read this, I thought it sounded incredibly weak. Soon after, however, I underwent a bit of a let him cook situation where I paired this exotic with the throwing hammers on Solar. It was still awful, but a cool idea all the same. The build I made was Solar with Sol Invictus and Roaring Flames alongside Torches, Solace, Empyrean and Searing. Exactly the same as most of the other solar builds, come to think of it. Cuirass of the Falling Star, Arc, Touch of Thunder, Knockout, Resistance, Discharge, Shock, Magnitude. Yet again we are abusing pulse grenades, but this time your Thunder Crash super deals twice as much damage and grants you an overshield which you can use to get back to your fire team. In raids, I prefer using another exotic, Heart of Inmost Light usually, and hot swapping to this once DPS starts, but this build will do just fine if you're lazy. Hoarfrost Z, Stasis, Tectonic Harvest, Cryoclasm, Fissures, Shards, Rime, Conduction. Your barricade becomes a wall of stasis crystals. Each crystal you destroy will drop a stasis shard which can grant you some overshield. If you use Elemental Charge on your legs, you'll gain armor charges from these shards too. What you do with the armor charge is up to you. You can either feed it back into your abilities through kickstart mods or give yourself a damage boost through surge mods. Arbor Warden, Void, Bastion, Controlled Demolition, Expulsion, Persistence, Instability, Leeching. Arbor Warden is an interesting one, you see. Activating your barricade ability will charge a grenade which you can use to deploy the barricade. This is a next to useless gimmick, but will make it work. Bastion in our aspect slot will give us an overshield when we proc our barricade. Luckily this also works with Arbor Warden. I tried pairing this with Traveler's Chosen for very high uptime on my abilities, and I can't say I was disappointed. In Traveler's Chosen, the exotic's awful. If you use this exotic, you'll be a Warden of nothing. Laugh. Lion Rampants. Strand, I guess? You can pair this with Grapple for a pretty versatile jumping puzzle build. I used Into the Fray and Banner of War as my aspects for Woven Mail and Healing respectively. I also threw on Warding, Continuity, Generation, and Warding. I've written Warding twice, go Ascent instead. Most of them don't do a lot for the purpose of this build besides Generation. You can put on Quicksilver Storm for guaranteed tangles that you can throw and grapple to traverse large distances. Eager Edge is also useful for traversing large distances, but I'm sure you probably already have a sword equipped. Peacekeepers, Arc, Touch of Thunder, Knockout, Shock, Magnitude, Amplitude, Frequency. Peacekeepers do all kinds of things to SMGs, none of which are weird and or wacky unfortunately. You get some airborne effectiveness, maxed out handling, some ready speed, you also gain movement speed, slide distance, ADS movement speed, penalty, whatever that is, all boring PvP stuff really. We're taking these boots into PvE alongside Risk Runner. Your grenades can be thrown at your feet to proc Risk Runner's Arc Conductor perk, and damaging an enemy with your melee will grant lightning fast reload speeds to go along with all the other benefits. Dune Marchers, Arc, Knockout, Touch of Thunder, Instinct, Shock, Beacons, Magnitude. Sprinting for a short duration builds a charge. Melee attacking an enemy will release this charge and chain lightning between enemies. Knockout gives us extra melee damage and range, which helps with this. Being so up close to enemies can make you vulnerable, which is why we have Instinct to automatically shock nearby enemies when our shields are broken, and Beacons to blind enemies with special weapons. Weapons like Forbearance or Path of Least Resistance are very good here. MK44 Standasides, Void, Controlled Demolition, Offensive Bulwark, Leeching, Provision, Exchange, Domineering. Your Shield Bash melee ability will regenerate half its energy on use, meaning you can essentially have half the normal cooldown. Our fragments have been picked to feed melee kills into grenade energy and grenade kills into melee energy, creating a loop. You can also use mods like Heavy Handed and Firepower alongside Invigoration for the boots for even more melee energy. Don't underestimate the effectiveness of these mods, they can be pretty powerful. Antaeus Wards. I can't currently think of a single situation where these would be useful in PvE, but here we go. Solar, Consecration, Roaring Flames, Mercy, Blistering, Eruption, Searing. I've focused this build around Consecration since you have to slide to proc it. Sliding with Antaeus Wards equipped will generate a reflective shield for a brief period of time. This will allow you to rush into crowded rooms and pop Consecration, which will proc ignitions in an increased area of effect. Defeating a scorched target grants a Restoration Fire Sprite too, so our lack of Sol Invictus isn't too detrimental to our survivability. An interesting idea, but most other exotics will do you better. Feel free to switch them out for Pyrogale, Hallowfire Heart, Hoyle, whatever you like, as long as it ain't these. Peregrine Greaves. Arc, Knockout, Juggernaut, Resistance, Shock, Ions, Feedback. Like the Standasides, these legs focus on your shoulder charges. Activating your shoulder charge in the air will have it dealing 225% more damage, which is very, very good. If you don't know, this can be paired with a Stasis Freeze to almost double your damage on top of that. My favourite way to do this is with Conditional Finality. In harder content, just flashbang the enemy before walking up and freezing them. Phoenix Cradle, Solar, Roaring Flames, Sol Invictus, Benevolence, Empyrean, Torches, Searing. Not only do sunspots last twice as long, they also affect allies. The rest of the build is just a classic bonk titan. I didn't really pay much attention to this exotic before people used it in Contest Crota to stay alive after a Well of Radiance was destroyed. The issue currently is that Well doesn't really get destroyed outside of, well, contest raids. However, there is some speculation in the community at the minute that Well of Radiance is going to get a nerf. What form this nerf will take, I don't know, but Phoenix Cradle might be a decent substitute depending on what gets changed. That's a very big might though, we'll see when the nerf happens. Path of Burning Steppes, also solar. Roaring Flames at Sol Invictus, Empyrean Torches Solace Tempering. It's the same deal as Eternal Warrior, Icefall Mantle and Doomfang Pauldrons, granting you a damage bonus on kills but for solar weapons. The other key differences are that number 1 you get max damage stacks on a grenade kill, and number 2 you can break out of a stasis crystal more easily. I used this with a demo weapon to take advantage of the damage boost on grenade kills. Additionally stacks with Adrenaline Junkie too, since that's a weapon perk. Abeyant Leap, Strand, Into the Fray, Dregner's Lash. Continuity, Generation, Warding, Mind. Suspending an enemy gives you Woven Mail. We suspend enemies in a variety of ways, namely our Grenade and our Drenger's Lash class ability. Speaking of the class ability, it spawns 3 beam things instead of 1. Woven Mail giving a constant 55% damage reduction is super nice for harder content, and while Suspend got hit pretty hard, especially against champions, Thread of Continuity can make it almost as good as it once was. With that though, all 120 exotics across all classes have had a build created specifically suited to them. Well, sort of, I'm missing the new ones for Warlock and Hunter, but it's close enough. I never want to see another build again in my life.